Hey folks, welcome back. In this video I'm going to show you guys how can you build your calculate statement in DAX, right? So calculate is a very important statement to work with DAX, and it's very basic. It's a must-have statement while you work with Power BI. Right? So apart from calculate statement, I'm also going to show you guys in depth about the evaluation context modifications, like your filter context, row context, what is a query context, and all of that in detail, and how all of these contexts propagates into the different relationships, and how does this squeeze the tables when you apply these contexts, right? It's not a big deal, but it's really important to understand while you work with Power BI, right? So what you see here on the screen is basically your pivot table, right? So I have my product name and I have a sales amount built here. So that is exactly, and is called as an evaluation context. What it means is basically we have different product names and the sales amount is getting evaluated against different product names, right? So that's basically an evaluation context. So right now there is no filters applied on the table whatsoever because I don't have a calculate statement built against it right now. So it's going to take the full table, get all of the product names and get all of the sales amount from the fact table. I can show you the model here. So you see here the sales amount is coming from the fact table here, and all the products are coming from the dim product here, right? We also have other dimensions like your sales territory, currency, customer, date, and promotions, right? So so that's what we had. I don't have any other filter modifications here. It is just taking the full table and getting me the sales amount according to the product, right? So now let's go ahead and see how can we modify this evaluation context by applying our filter context and all of that one by one. So for that I'm going to create a calculate statement. It's going to be a measure. The good way to do a measure is basically to create a dummy table. Let's just name it as a measure and just load it, and then put all the measures, whatever you create within the model, into that table, right? It is just going to act as like a placeholder for all your measures. So I'm going to create a new measure. In this one I'm going to say I wanted to get the sales for the United States, right? So there's different regions within the database. I'm interested only in the US sales. So I'm going to use a calculate statement. You see, this calculate statement, it's going to evaluate an expression in a context modified by the filters. So it's going to evaluate this expression. It could be like sum x, average x, min, max, or whatever it is. But that expression, you can actually modify the place where it is going to get applied, right? So that's a tricky piece here, and it's really an important piece here. So for example, in this one I'm just going to do a sum of sales amount, right? So that's the expression piece. And for the filter I'm going to say country okay, country is equal to United States. Country is equal to United States. Alright, so let's run that, and I'm gonna put it inside the visual here. Alright, so when I have it here, you can see here there is a total sales amount for all the different regions. I think it has like Canada, US, Europe, all of that. And the second column shows only the US sales for different products, right? So what's happening here, right? It's really interesting to understand here, this formula here. So it's pretty straightforward to understand this, what it's happening here. But then how that propagates is what I'm going to show you guys. So what it says is basically sum of the sales amount, right? Get me sum of the sales amount, but filter for the United States within the country column, right? So this is a table and this is a column name. Within this columns, only filter for the United States, right? How this filter context is going to propagate into your fact sales is what I'm going to show you right now. So your sales territory is here, right? So you have your country column here, sales territory country. In this one, you have only asked it to provide the United States sales, right? So this table is going to get filtered right now, right? It's going to get squeezed only for United States. So it's going to be a smaller version of the table. When this gets squeezed, since it has a relationship with the fact table, one to many, so the filter what you have applied in this table is going to get propagated into your fact table, and the fact table will also get filtered eventually. So at that time when I make a sum of the sales amount in the fact table, it's only going to have all the sales amount that's corresponding only to the United States data set, right? So that's basically the filter propagation here. And it's really interesting and important to understand how this thing works. So I can just squeeze this table, the dimension table, which has a relationship to my fact table, and my fact table will also get indirectly squeezed, right? Because my relationship table is already getting squeezed, so I am also going to get squeezed. That's the basic concept of that. So what you just saw is basically your filter context, right? So now let's talk about what is a row context here. So for that, I'm gonna show you guys a calculated column. So what I did here is a measure, right? So this measure can sit anywhere and it can work against any of those different dimensions you have here. So in this product name dimension, you see the measure whatever you created, it works here, right? So in the calculated column is only going to be, it's going to be a separate column, but it's like it's a calculated column, right? So I'm going to create a column called revenue in my fact sales, right? So this is going to be basically the multiplication of order quantity, right, multiplied by the sales amount. That's it, right? It's very simple. Quantity into sales, and what you just did right now is basically going to apply the row context. So how is that working? So row context is basically for when this is specific calculation here, a multiplied by b, when that is getting evaluated, each and every row is going to get evaluated. So each and every row context will be considered for calculating this specific calculation here. That is basically a row context. So again, you can also play around with you can have like a pre-squeezed table using your filter context. You can already squeeze your table for only for sales territory as United States, and then you can also apply this calculation on top of that filter context. Basically that will apply the row context on top of your filter context, right? So that's also one thing that you can do, and that will come as you go. As you work on it, you might have to do that in a certain use case, right? So this is basically a row context high level. The different other examples of row context could be like, if you wanted to do like your if you wanted to, let's say if you wanted to do sum x, right? So let's do a sum x here. Let's calculate the same revenue only for United States. So I'm going to create another measure. So you have US sales here. Now let's get the US revenue, right? So US revenue is equal to, again, calculate. This time I'm going to use sum x, right? Sum x is sum x, average x, all these iterative functions. They're all obviously going to be using the row context. Since it's iterator, so it's going to iterate with each and every row, and it's going to apply the row context for each and every row against your calculation, right? That's what is happening here. Alright, let's go ahead and do this right now. So I'm going to put my table name first, fact internet sales, and then I have to put what is the expression. So in this table I'm going to use my order quantity multiplied by the unit price, right? So that is going to be the function for sum x, and then I'm going to modify this context by only for United States, right? So I'm going to say country is equal to United States. That's it, right? So now if I do this, let's see what's going to happen. Alright, so now once you have this built, I don't need my sales amount here. I'm going to take it off. So let me bring my US revenue here. So what you have here is basically the US sales and US revenue. So this function, again, as I mentioned, it's going to use the row context. So it's going to basically do the iterator function. Each and every row, it's going to go ahead and then multiply the order quantity and the unit price. But then it's going to have a pre-filtered table, which is only going to have United States with that, right? So that's basically what you have here for your row context, right? Hope that makes sense. Let me know if you have any questions on these ones. But the next one I'm going to show you guys is a query context, which is really an interesting one as well. So for example, so let's say let me take off my US based sales and revenue, and bring back my overall sales revenue, sales amount I mean. So let's bring back the sales amount. Now let's say I wanted to say bring back my sales amount based on the slicers that I put in, right? I'm going to create a slicer for the country. Alright, so now what's going to happen is, so this is your slicer for the dim sales territory, right? So if you only select for the France, right? So I'm going to get the sales amount for different products only for France, and then UK, Australia, Canada, United States, right? So all of these have a specific sales amount for their different products, right? So this is basically your query context. Now what's going to happen in the backend? So whenever I select one of these different values here, as a SQL query is going to get generated in the backend, and that is basically going to get supplied to my SQL server, right? So since I'm connecting to my AdventureWorks data warehouse database, so now this might have pre-cached data already within my Power Query. So what's going to happen is basically each and every time I work on this, an SQL query is going to get generated, and that's going to have that context of whatever I am selecting here. You see different values to select, so it's going to query the database using that where condition, and that's going to have all of these whatever I'm going to select here. That's the where condition basically, right? So when I modify these query context on the screen, basically just like using your slicers like that, that is when you be using your query context in the backend, right? So that is what query context means. So that's what I wanted to show you guys today. So let me know if you have any questions in the comments. In the next video I'm going to show you guys a lot of other DAX functions like your summarize, average X, different other financial functions as well. So stay tuned with me. Thank you.